Welcome to the AEN Stories channel.
I used to measure my life in quarters Q1 through Q4, earnings calls, audit cycles, year-end closeouts. I knew when to push a sales campaign, how to read a balance sheet like a map, how to spot a cash flow problem 3 months before it hit the rocks. At 42, I wasn't rich, but I was solid. Assistant branch manager at a regional bank in northeast Ohio Cleveland suburbs, tucked between a strip mall orthodontist and a dry cleaner that still took paper tickets. I wore the same navy suit every Monday, rotated ties on a spreadsheet because it amused me, and brought donuts on Fridays for the tellers. It wasn't glamorous, it was steady. In my town, steady meant something. Then my branch went consolidation adjacent. That's the phrase corporate used. They shut our location, merged accounts into a bigger branch 10 miles away, and somehow the headcount didn't survive the trip. I got 2 months severance, a folder with Cobra paperwork, and a handshake from a district manager who had introduced himself 3 times and never remembered my name. The Monday after, I sat at the kitchen table and watched my wife, Karen, pour her coffee. She didn't say much. She kept stirring and stirring like the sugar would form a raft we could both climb onto. "We'll be okay," I told her. "Sure," she said, and looked at the clock like time itself was judging me. The first week felt like a staycation gone wrong. I fixed the wobbly cabinet door, unclogged the upstairs sink, cleaned the dryer vent because YouTube said it was a fire hazard. I told myself I was being useful. Karen told her parents I was between opportunities, which is like telling the Titanic passengers they were between boats. Her parents never liked me. Not really. They were the kind of people who introduced themselves by saying where they summered. They lived 20 minutes away in a Tudor, with original stained glass, and a lawn service that came on Wednesdays. Her mother wore tennis skirts and never had grass on her shoes. Her father, a retired sales VP, kept bourbon in a decanter shaped like a globe and swiveled it when he was about to say something cutting. Karen could have married up, he said once, a year into our marriage, after I corrected him on a loan-to-value ratio. He smiled when he said it, which somehow made it worse. Karen was 36, still looked like she'd walked off the stage to her high school reunion. She had that bright, forward energy that made you want to fix things in advance for her, like you were arranging chairs on a porch before a storm. She'd grown up comfortable and expected life to heed the schedule. I thought my steadiness would make her feel safe. I didn't realize it would also make me a target when the ground shifted. 2 weeks after the bank shuttered, I had a spreadsheet of every credit union and financial services job within 50 miles. I refreshed Indeed like it owed me rent. The market was ugly. Half the listings wanted 5 years of digital product experience. I didn't have. The other half wanted a 25-year-old who could do 3 jobs for the price of one and didn't remember pensions. The severance countdown got louder in my head. Mortgages don't care about your LinkedIn posts. By week 3, I swallowed the pride I thought I didn't have and signed up to drive. It started as rideshare nights and weekends and then turned into a full-time patch job when the interviews didn't materialize. I told myself it was temporary, a bridge. Bridges are still structures. They hold weight. I got to know Cleveland from the inside of a Camry. Hospital runs at dawn, bar closeouts at 2 a.m., airport drop-offs with sleepy salespeople who said have a good one like they meant it. The GPS voice became a second conscience. I bought a seat cover on one of those handheld vacs that turned change into projectiles. In winter, the slush turned the rubber mats into pale brown lakes. An older lady once patted my shoulder on the way to her chemotherapy appointment and told me I drove like a gentleman. That carried me for a week. Karen called it Ubering as a verb, which somehow shrank it down. "How long are you going to be Ubering?" she'd ask, as if it were a fad that would pass if I just waited it out. I said, "Until something opens up." She didn't say much after that. Silence grew between us like mold in a shower. You don't scrub because you're too tired. Her parents took the silence and filled it. They invited us for Sunday dinner, a trap with roast beef. Her father swiveled the bourbon globe and asked about career trajectory. Her mother squeezed Karen's hand and said the words I had started to hear through walls. You deserve better. People say deserve like it's a math problem. Life isn't long division. It's more like trying to balance a ladder on gravel. By May, the Camry had 18,000 new miles. I was sleeping in a loop. Midnight comes, then 3 a.m., then the alarm at 6 because school drop-off still happens even when you're not a branch manager anymore. We don't have kids, never worked out for us, but we had obligations that act like children. The mortgage, the car payment, the credit card for the refrigerator that died last winter. I learned which gas stations had the cheapest coffee and which had bathrooms you wouldn't regret. Shame is a funny thing. It doesn't show up all at once. It seeps, tightens your chest when you run into an old client at the grocery store and they say, "How's the branch?" and you nod because it's easier than explaining. It heats your ears when your wife jokes in front of friends that you switch to hospitality and no one knows where to look. It makes you check your phone too often for ratings from strangers because 5 stars feel like a breadcrumb trail back to the person you were. The night it turned, I was 2 turns away from home, a run that started before sunset and stretched past last call. The house was dark except for the stove clock, and I tiptoed like I was the one doing something wrong. Karen was on the couch, cross-legged, phone in both hands, her face bright from the screen. She clicked it off when I walked in, too quick, like a kid hiding a test she didn't want you to see. How was it? She asked. Fine, I said, and set my keys in the bowl we bought at a craft fair when we still went to those. She said she was going to her mother's the next afternoon to help with paperwork. I nodded. I made a sandwich and ate it over the sink because I didn't feel like plates. She went upstairs. I sat in the quiet and listened to the fridge hum, small, nervous animal. The next day, after a string of airport runs and one gentleman who told me his entire colonoscopy story, because I had a kind face, I came home to grab a nap before the evening surge. Karen's phone was on the kitchen island, face up, pinging with that hollow little chirp that sounds like a bird trapped in an air duct. I don't snoop. I don't. But when you've been sinking 4 months and the rope is sitting there coiled, you test it. I tapped the screen to silence the notification, and the lock screen lit up with a photo preview. The kind that doesn't ask permission, because the world doesn't owe you that. It was a picture from a party, someone's back patio with string lights, the kind that make every night look like Instagram. Karen was there, smiling the way she used to smile when I got promotions, arms around a man I recognized from old stories. A name floated up from a high school memory I'd heard too many times. Mike Jarrety had started a logistics company, which, around here, can mean anything from trucking to having an LLC and a nice logo. He wore a blazer with no tie like he'd practiced casual in front of a mirror. The caption said, "Old friends, new beginnings," and my stomach turned like I was going over a hill too fast. The timestamp wasn't last week, it was last night. The night, she said, she was at her mother's, doing paperwork that apparently involved string lights and wine glasses. I put the phone down like it was hot. I walked a lap around the kitchen. I checked the back door lock, then the front, not because I'm obsessive, but because when your life starts to quake, you make sure the hinges are tight. I told myself there had to be an explanation. There's always an explanation. People are whole continents of context. You can't know the terrain from one satellite image. When she came home, the sun had dropped and the streetlights had that humming orange that makes everything look like it's happening under an old photograph. She set her purse down. It weighed the same it did in the morning. She kissed my cheek, a peck that could have been a fingerprint. I asked how her mother was, and she said fine to fast, and I felt something inside me pull tight and snap like a rubber band you've stretched past its limit. I saw a photo, I said, hands flat on the counter, like I needed the laminate to keep me from floating off. From last night, you were with Mike. She blinked twice, the way people do when they're choosing between 3 doors in their head. Then she picked the one I knew she would. I stopped by a friend's for 30 minutes. I didn't think it was a big deal. You told me you were at your mom's. I was, she said. Before, why didn't you say you were going to a party? Because I knew you'd make it a thing, she said, and rolled her eyes at the ceiling like the ceiling and I had conspired to inconvenience her. The problem with being trained to de-escalate in banking fraud calls, angry customers, is that you think everything has a calm out, a script. You think if you ask the right questions in the right tone, the truth will line up. It didn't. The more I asked for simple details, who hosted, who was there, why she didn't mention it, the more the answers bent around corners and disappeared. She said I was interrogating. She said I was controlling. She said if I had a real job, we wouldn't even be having this conversation because she'd be out with co-workers like a normal person. That last part landed. She knew where to aim. I slept on the couch that night because sometimes distance is the only tool you have that won't break. The couch is too short for me. My feet hung off, cold. I listened to the refrigerator hum and the heater click and the strip of wind under the front door whistle when a truck went by. At 2 a.m., a surge hit the rideshare app, and I almost took it just to be in motion. Instead, I stared at the ceiling and tried to remember when in my life I'd last felt certain about anything. Things didn't explode the next day. They deflated. Karen headed out for yoga with a gym bag that seemed heavier than yoga requires. I drove people to work, to school, to a courthouse where a man in a suit hugged his mother and cried. I told myself not to project meaning onto strangers' moments. Then I told myself that people are just patterns and some patterns are visible from space. On Thursday, her parents invited us over again. I didn't want to go. Karen said it would look bad. I put on my Monday tie out of habit, and we sat at their long table with the linen runner and a centerpiece that could survive nuclear winter. Her father swiveled the globe decanter. Her mother offered seconds before I had finished firsts. After dinner, the conversation turned like the weather in April. David, her father said, folding his hands like a judge. What's the plan? For what? I asked, and knew what. For your situation, he said, as if he'd spilled something on their good table. In working, I said. I'm interviewing. I'm doing what I can. Her mother looked at Karen. Sweetie, you're 36, she said, as if we were all counting down to some invisible deadline. You need stability. We have stability, I said. And the words sounded small the moment they left my mouth. Her father smiled without teeth. You know, Mike Jarrety just opened a distribution hub. That's a man who sees opportunity. Karen didn't flinch. That told me more than anything else said at that table. We drove home in the kind of quiet that narrows your vision. When we pulled in, the porch light had burned out and I'd forgotten to replace it because fixing small things had started to feel like the kind of hope I couldn't afford. Karen went upstairs. I stood in the driveway, hands in pockets, breath ghosting in the cool air, and tried to decide if stubbornness is a virtue or a slow death. I wish I could say I handled it with calm dignity and a 3-step plan. The truth is I handled it like a man who's been taught to be useful and suddenly can't find the knob that opens that door. I kept driving. I kept applying. I kept asking gentle questions that were met with hard answers or no answers. The nights got longer. My ratings stayed high. 5 stars for a man who could get you from A to B without making you feel the potholes. I was proud of that. Pride is a thin coat in February, but it's something. The call I didn't expect came from Karen's brother, Matt. We aren't close, we nod at family things, talk browns and whether the brisket is dry. He's a union electrician with shoulders like a tackling dummy and a way of saying what he means that isn't always kind, but is rarely wrong. He asked if we could grab a beer. I said sure because saying no to a lifeline is a luxury. We met at a place with neon signs that had never been new. He ordered us to drafts and didn't small talk. Dave, he said, I like you. You're boring in a good way. My sister's making a mess. I stared at the phone for a beat. I don't want to talk about your sister behind her back. Then talk about yourself, he said. Are you okay? Define okay. He nodded like that was the right answer. Look, he said, I'm not your therapist. I'm telling you what I told her. Stop calling him a loser. He lost a job. He didn't lose his spine. And if she keeps stepping out, I won't cover for her. Hearing someone else say it out loud was like opening a window in a stale room. Fresh air hurts your teeth if you've been breathing dust. I went home and slept hard for the first time in a month. In the morning, I brewed coffee, poured 2 mugs, and waited for Karen at the island like it was a neutral country where peace treaties are signed. She came down in leggings and that gym bag. I set a mug in front of her. "We need to talk," I said. Not as an ultimatum, but as a weather report. She wrapped her hands around the mug like a prop. "About what?" "About last night's photo," I said. "About the last few nights. About whether we're on the same team." She stared at the black surface of the coffee as if it were a mirror that wasn't flattering. "I'm not happy," she said finally. "I know," I said, and felt the truth in my tongue like a burn. "But not happy isn't a plan." She set the mug down, untouched. "I need more," she said. "More what?" I asked. "Money, time, adventure, a different me." "Don't do that," she said. "Don't make it a quiz." I nodded. I'd run out of escalations today. "Okay," I said. "Then I need honesty." She didn't answer. Silence filled the kitchen. The fridge hummed. A car passed outside, and the window rattled a little in its frame. In the corner of my eye, I could see the mail on the counter: credit card bill, water bill, a flyer for roofing we couldn't afford, and a coupon for a pizza place where the slices are too big to be practical. Ordinary life lined up in a stack, waiting its turn. I didn't know then that the next weeks would turn our house into a station where one of us was always arriving while the other was leaving. I didn't know that he'd learn the exact sound of the front door when it closes too gently, like it's trying not to wake the truth. I didn't know that depression doesn't look like crying in the shower. Sometimes it looks like drifting 3 inches above your own life, watching yourself do the dishes and not remembering how water works. I only knew that I was still driving, still moving, still counting miles, and that somewhere between pickups and drop-offs you'd have to decide whether standing still and standing firm are the same thing. Spoiler, they're not. I topped off the washer fluid that afternoon, just to do a small thing all the way to done. Then I logged in for the evening surge and let the map light up, blue and red and pulsing, as if the city were telling me, keep going. There's a point in every long drive when the road hum turns into background music and your thoughts fill in the lyrics. That's what my life became in those months. Endless miles, endless thoughts, and the growing sense that I was a passenger in my own marriage. Karen didn't scream or pack a bag. She didn't even fight much. She just withdrew. She stayed out later. She said girls' night like it was a shield. And when I asked for details, she gave me phrases instead of answers. With friends, just out, don't worry about it. The more vague she became, the more specific my suspicions grew. I wanted proof, not paranoia. But proof doesn't always come in neat packages. It seeps in through cracks. A receipt from a steakhouse we'd never gone to together. A whiff of cologne that wasn't mine on her jacket. A look in her eyes that didn't land on me when she smiled. The night I knew for sure. I wasn't even trying to find it. I dropped off a couple of rowdy college kids at a late-night taco place and came home around 1 a.m. The driveway was empty. Her car was gone. I sat in mine with the engine off, listening to it tick as it called. The whole street dark except for the neighbor's porch light. She didn't pull in until 2:30. She slipped out of her car barefoot, heels in her hand. She saw me through the windshield and froze for half a second too long. Then she smiled like she'd rehearsed it in the rear view. "You're up late," she said. "Yeah," I answered. Though what I meant was, "Where were you?" She brushed past me into the house. I didn't follow. I just sat there in the dark car, breathing through my teeth. Her parents made it worse. Every Sunday, it was another dinner where I was the unspoken agenda item. Her father with the bourbon globe, asking, "So, David, any progress?" As though my career were a crossword puzzle I hadn't finished. Her mother dabbing her mouth with a napkin before reminding Karen, "You deserve to be happy, sweetheart." Happy. That word had become a weapon. I was the opposite of it, apparently. The anti-happy. One Sunday, I finally snapped. Her father leaned back in his leather chair, tilted his drink, and said, "You know, David, some men thrive under pressure. Others he let the pause do the damage." I put my fork down. With respect, "Sir, I didn't ask for your evaluation. I'm working. I'm providing. It might not look like it used to, but I'm carrying my share." Karen stiffened beside me. Her mother gasped like I'd just cursed in church. Her father smirked, satisfied that he'd struck the nerve he wanted. The car ride home was silent except for the wipers swiping at drizzle. Finally, Karen said, "You embarrass me." I gripped the wheel tighter. "They humiliate me every week. Karen, when are you going to call that what it is?" She didn't answer. She just turned up the radio, drowning me out with a top 40 song I couldn't name. It was Matt, her brother, who gave me the only scrap of validation in that storm. We met at the same dive bar with neon lights that hummed louder than the jukebox. He slid me a beer and didn't mince words. "She's seen him, Dave," he said. I told her she's being selfish. She didn't listen. My stomach sank even though my mind had already known it. Mike, yeah, the so-called businessman. He's been sniffing around 4 months. She let him in. I'm not defending her, but I'll tell you this, you're not crazy. You're not making it up. That sentence, "you're not crazy," landed like a lifeline. It didn't fix anything, but it reminded me I wasn't hallucinating my own misery. After that, I went through the motions. Work, eat, sleep, repeat. Except sleep didn't come easy. Depression isn't dramatic. It doesn't knock you to the floor in sobs every night. Sometimes it's just staring at the ceiling at 3 a.m., wondering how you got from being a man in a suit at a bank to a ghost in your own marriage. I drove more than I should have, 70 hours a week behind the wheel. The car became both my income and my escape. Strangers told me stories they'd forget in 10 minutes. Couples argued in my back seat about where to eat. One guy asked if I liked my job, and I laughed so hard he asked if I was okay. Truth was, I wasn't. But when the kids climbed into my back seat for school drop-offs, Karen's nieces and nephews, I helped with. Sometimes I faked it. For them, I could still be the solid uncle. The man who knew which roads had the least potholes. I knew the marriage was dying. I just didn't know if I was ready to admit it. That admission came faster than I expected. One night, Karen came home late again. I was at the kitchen table with bills spread out like a losing hand of cards. She looked at the mess, sighed, and said, "You can't keep living like this." "Like what?" I asked. "Like this," she said, gesturing at me. "The bills, the house, all of it. I'm not happy, David. I haven't been for a long time." The words landed flat. Not shocking, not new, just final. I wanted to fight, to plead, to ask if all the years, all the sacrifices meant nothing. But looking at her, I realized she'd already moved on. Her body was still in our kitchen, but her heart was already at Mike's patio under those string lights. I leaned back in my chair and exhaled. "Then go." She blinked, maybe expecting a war. Instead, she got surrender. The next week, she packed. Her parents helped. Her brother didn't show up. She moved into a townhouse Mike had rented near his office. And just like that, 12 years of marriage fit into the trunk of a Lexus and drove away. The first night alone, the silence was unbearable. No clinking dishes, no hair dryer humming upstairs, no passive-aggressive sighs floating through the hall. Just me, the hum of the refrigerator, and a house that suddenly felt too big for one person. That's when the real fall began. The depression, the weight of being called a loser echoing in my head. Nights driving until sunrise just to avoid lying awake in that empty bed. Coffee and energy drinks replacing sleep. My body running on fumes, my spirit running on nothing. But sometimes you have to hit bottom to find the ground to push off from. And that moment was coming. After Karen left, the house became a museum of things that didn't matter anymore. The wedding china we never used. The guest room her mother decorated with throw pillows no one sat on. Even the pictures on the wall felt like exhibits of a life that had closed 4 renovations. I moved through it like a night guard, turning on lights I didn't need, checking locks no one was trying to open. Depression isn't always dramatic, it's subtle. It's the weight of the blanket that feels too heavy to pull off in the morning. It's staring at the coffee pot, knowing you should brew a pot, but not caring enough to press the button. It's counting miles behind the wheel, not because you want the money, but because movement feels better than stillness. The ride-share app was my lifeline. I drove through the night, chasing surge pricing like it was oxygen. The car smelled like Febreze and exhaustion. I kept gum in the console, a box of tissues in the back seat. People told me things, drunk confessions, business calls, tearful arguments that I forgot as soon as they closed the door. Their lives felt more real than mine. Bills piled up. The mortgage check bounced once, then twice. Credit card statements came with red lettering. I didn't tell my parents. I couldn't. They lived 2 towns over, in the same ranch house I grew up in. My mom would have cried. My dad would have said, "We'll help you, son." And I couldn't bear to hear it. I was supposed to be the helper. The worst night came in December. Snow was coming down in thick sheets, the kind that blinds you when headlights hit it. I'd been driving 12 hours, too long, chasing fares from the airport. I pulled into the driveway, killed the engine, and sat there with my forehead on the steering wheel. My hands were shaking, not from the cold, from the exhaustion. For a second, a dark thought slipped in. What if I just didn't wake up tomorrow? That scared me enough to get out of the car. My boots crunched in the snow. I stood in the driveway, staring at the dark house, and thought, if I keep going like this, it'll disappear. That night, I called Matt, her brother. It was past midnight, but he picked up. "Dave," he said, "I don't know what I'm doing anymore." I admitted. He was quiet for a beat. Then he said, "Good. That means you're ready to do something different." The next week, he dragged me to a community college orientation. Small business management. The banner read. My first reaction was to laugh. Me, go back to school at 42. I hadn't sat in a classroom into decades. But Matt wasn't joking. "You're already managing. The car is your business. You just don't see it yet," he said. Something about that landed. Maybe it was because he wasn't pitying me. He wasn't saying I was a loser. He was saying I had potential I wasn't using. I signed up. Part-time classes at night. Accounting, logistics, entrepreneurship. I showed up with a notebook and a pen, feeling like an imposter among kids half my age who tapped on laptops with stickers I didn't understand. But the material clicked. I knew balance sheets. I knew customer service. I knew how to grind. All I needed was to connect the dots. The depression didn't vanish overnight, but it had competition. Instead of staring at the ceiling at 3 a.m., I was outlining a business plan. Instead of driving 80 hours a week, I cut back to 40 and used the rest of the time to study. Karen barely called. When she did, it was transactional. "The divorce papers need your signature. My lawyer will be in touch." She never asked how I was. That used to sting. Eventually, it became background noise. Her brother checked in more. "Keep going," he'd say. "Don't stop now." His faith in me was the rope I grabbed when my own faith wasn't enough. 2 years passed faster than I expected. The classroom turned into certification. The certification turned into a license. The license turned into a bank loan, the kind I used to approve for other people. And the bank approved mine. Irony has a sense of humor. That loan became 3 vans with fresh paint jobs and a logo I sketched on a napkin. North Shore Transport. At first, it was just me and one hired driver, hustling airport runs and medical appointments. Then came contract schools, senior centers, corporate shuttles. Suddenly, I wasn't just driving, I was running a company. The day I signed payroll for my first 2 employees, I sat in the office, small, cheap, to desks and a coffee maker that sputtered more than it brewed, and cried. Not because I was sad, because I had made it through. When Karen heard about the business, she called once. "So, you're doing okay," she said, almost like it disappointed her. "I'm more than okay," I answered. And I meant it. I hung up and looked around my office. It smelled like new paint and cheap coffee. There were invoices on the desk, contracts on the wall, and keys to vans that carried my name. It wasn't glamorous, but it was mine. Built from nothing. Built after everyone said I was done. I realized then, failure isn't losing a job or a marriage. Failure is staying on the ground after you fall. It'd fallen, hard, but I got back up. And that's worth more than any title I ever had at the bank. They say the hardest part of a fall isn't the landing. It's deciding whether to get back up. I used to think failure defined you, but now I know what defines you is what you do after. 2 years after Karen left, my mornings look different. No more dread. No more staring at the ceiling while the clock mocked me. Instead, I'd wake up before dawn, lace up my boots, and head to the lot where 3 transport vans sat waiting with my company's name on the side. North Shore Transport. Every time I unlocked one of those doors, it felt like opening a future ID built myself. My drivers to guys who reminded me of myself in my 20s, hungry for work, but overlooked trusted me with their paychecks. That responsibility felt heavier than any mortgage or credit card bill ever did. Because this time, it wasn't about keeping up appearances. It was about building something real. The first time we landed a contract with a local private school, I drove the route myself, just to make sure everything ran smooth. The kids piled into the van, chattering, backpacks bouncing. A teacher gave me a nod of thanks. Driving them, I realized I wasn't just earning. I was providing, creating jobs, creating stability. Something Karen always said I couldn't do. And that's when it hit me I wasn't the loser anymore. I never had been. I was just stuck in someone else's definition of success. Of course, ghosts linger. There were nights when I'd drive past the old bank branch building, now a dollar store, and feel a pang. Or when I saw a Lexus pull out of Mike's office parking lot and wondered if Karen was still inside, living the life she thought she wanted. Sometimes bitterness bubbled up. That she got to leave. That she tried to paint me as the problem. That her parents still whispered at church that she deserved better. But then I'd hear the laughter of my employees joking in the office, or my mother's voice on the phone telling me she was proud, or Matt dropping by with beers and saying, "You proved them all wrong, man." And the bitterness melted, because the truth was simple. I had rebuilt. The turning point came one Saturday afternoon. My parents came by the office. Dad, still in his old work boots, though he'd been retired 5 years, walked slowly around the vans, inspecting them like he would a car in his garage. Mom took photos on her phone, smiling like it was my graduation day. "You did good, son," Dad said, his voice gravelly but steady. "Not because you made money, because you didn't quit." That sentence, coming from a man who worked 40 years turning wrenches in a shop that never had air conditioning, meant more than any award or paycheck he'd ever earned. I still drive sometimes, even though I don't have to. I like it. The road clears my head. The hum of tires on asphalt feels like meditation now, not punishment. And when passengers ask if I enjoy this kind of work, I smile. Because I know something they don't. This isn't just work. This is freedom. Freedom from a marriage built on conditions. Freedom from in-laws who measured worth by paychecks. Freedom from the version of myself that thought stability only came from a corporate title. Now, stability comes from me. From the sweat, the hours, the risks, the faith I had to find when everyone else lost theirs. I don't know what Karen tells people about me now. Maybe that I drive vans. Maybe that I settled. But it doesn't matter, because I know who I am. I'm the man who fell hard, got back up, and built a company from nothing. The man who chose not to disappear when life tried to erase him. If you ask me today who I am, I won't tell you I'm a banker, or a driver, or even a business owner. I'll tell you I'm a survivor. And survivors don't quit. They rebuild. Stronger, wiser, freer. That's the American dream I live now, not the one where you buy a house and keep your head down, but the one where you rise after losing it all. The one where you prove to everyone and to yourself that no one else gets to write your ending. Thank you for listening my story. If you want more raw, real, and gripping stories like this, subscribe to the End Stories channel. Your support keeps these stories alive.